Three Airbus A380s, painted with giant smiling sea turtles, flying nothing but a single route between Tokyo and Honolulu. That's strange enough on its own, but here's the part that should really bother you. ANA never wanted these planes. They never ordered them. They never designed a route network around them. And yet, today, they own three of the most expensive aircraft ever built, purely because saying no would have cost them even more. So what actually happened here? Why does one of Japan's biggest airlines fly a jet it never asked for, painted like a beach vacation mascot? The answer involves a bankrupt rival, a nervous regulator, and a very expensive game of keep away with Delta Airlines, and it starts years before ANA ever entered the picture. Rewind to 2011. A low-cost Japanese carrier called Skymark Airlines decided it wanted to play in a different league entirely. Skymark had never operated a wide-body aircraft in its life. It was built for short domestic hops, the kind of airline that survives on tight margins and cheap fares. Then, out of nowhere, it ordered 6 Airbus A380s. 6, not 2, not 3. 6 of the largest passenger jets ever manufactured at roughly $400 million apiece. That's somewhere around $2.4 billion in commitments from a budget airline that had zero experience flying anything close to that size. The plan sounded bold on paper. Skymark wanted to fly these giants from Tokyo to New York and Tokyo to London, undercutting the two dominant carriers in Japan, ANA and Japan Airlines, on ticket price, while still offering the spectacle of the world's biggest jet. It was an aggressive, almost reckless bet on premium leisure travel from a company that had built its entire identity around being the cheap option. By 2014, that bet had collapsed. Skymark was burning through cash, preparing for aircraft that hadn't even been delivered yet, which meant zero revenue and enormous ongoing costs. Crew training, ground handling contracts, maintenance planning, all of it had to be built out in advance for jets that were still sitting on an assembly line. None of that spending produces a single ticket sold. It's pure outflow, month after month, for aircraft that don't exist yet in your operation. Airbus watched the payments stop coming and eventually ran out of patience. By most accounts, Airbus spent months trying to restructure the deal, searching for any version of the contract that could survive. It didn't work. In July of 2014, Airbus canceled the entire 6-jet order outright. Not because Skymark asked to cancel it, because Airbus pulled the plug first. 6 months later, in January of 2015, Skymark filed for bankruptcy. Notice the order of events. The planes were orphaned before the airline even went under, which meant somebody was going to end up owning 6 half-finished super jumbos with nowhere to go, and Airbus needed that problem solved fast. This is where it stops being a story about a failed airline and starts being a story about corporate chess. Because ANA didn't step in out of sympathy. ANA stepped in because Skymark's collapse created an opening, and openings like that get fought over. Here's the detail most people miss entirely. Delta Airlines was circling Skymark's bankruptcy too, looking for a way into the Japanese domestic market. Airport slots in Japan, especially at Tokyo Haneda, are some of the most restricted and valuable real estate in commercial aviation. If Delta had found a path to influence over Skymark's routes and slots, it would have handed an American carrier a foothold ANA had spent decades keeping locked out. So ANA moved, not to gain a fleet of A380s it actually wanted, but to make absolutely certain nobody else could use Skymark's collapse to their advantage. ANA even took a 16.5% stake in Skymark during the restructuring, and that number was not chosen by accident. Japanese aviation rules require an airline to surrender certain Haneda landing slots once its ownership stake in another carrier crosses 20%. ANA stopped just short of that line on purpose, buying influence without triggering the penalty. Think about how deliberate that is. A stake just large enough to shape decisions, small enough to dodge a regulatory tripwire that would have cost ANA some of the most valuable landing rights in the country. This wasn't a rescue mission dressed up as generosity. It was a calculated block, engineered down to a fraction of a percentage point. In March of 2016, ANA agreed to take 3 of the 6 A380s under construction. The other 3 were scrapped or reassigned elsewhere. According to reporting from Nikkei, the deal for those 3 aircraft was valued at roughly 150 billion yen, close to $1.25 billion, at a list price of around $428 million per A380. ANA paid nearly full market value, with a discount of maybe 3 to 5%. This was not a bargain bin purchase. This was a company spending top dollar to make sure a threat disappeared, which raises the obvious question. What do you actually do with 3 of the largest passenger jets on Earth when you never wanted them and they don't fit your network at all? You look at the route map and the answer is almost funny. One destination, Tokyo Narita to Honolulu. That's the entire assignment for these aircraft, and it's likely the only assignment they'll ever have. It's not a random choice, though. Hawaii pulls in well over 600,000 Japanese visitors a year, making it one of the single most popular international destinations for travelers from Japan. It's a route with deep, consistent demand, and Honolulu's airport happens to have the reinforced gates and wide taxiways needed to actually handle an aircraft this size. Out of every possible use for these orphan jets, this was probably the only one that made any operational sense. Then ANA did something unexpected. Instead of painting these aircraft in their standard blue and white colors, they created 3 entirely new liveries, each one covered in a giant, smiling sea turtle. Flying Honu, named after the Hawaiian word for turtle. 1 blue, 1 green, 1 orange. 3 unwanted super jumbos turned into a mascot fleet. That decision is smarter than it looks. Rather than quietly absorbing these jets as just another asset on the balance sheet, ANA turned them into an event. A flight on one of these aircraft became something passengers actively want to experience, not just a way to get from Tokyo to Hawaii. It reframed a forced purchase as a unique selling point, and it worked. Aviation enthusiasts track which colored turtle they'll get. Photos circulate constantly online. Some travelers reportedly choose ANA specifically because of these planes. None of that changes the underlying math, though. Per seat, a Boeing 787 is dramatically cheaper to operate on this route than an A380. ANA didn't take these jets because the economics were better. They took them because every alternative was worse. Consider what could have happened instead. A rival airline, maybe a Chinese carrier expanding internationally, or Delta, through some reshaped version of Skymark, could have picked up these jets and used their massive capacity to undercut ANA directly on the Hawaii route. Or Airbus could have simply scrapped 6 partially built aircraft, sending a message to every airline watching that walking away from a signed order carries no real consequence. Or the bankruptcy could have dragged on for years in Japanese courts, leaving valuable international route rights stuck in legal limbo where any competitor might eventually claim them. Paying roughly $1.3 billion closed off all 3 of those outcomes simultaneously. It's the kind of move that looks expensive on a spreadsheet and looks completely rational once you understand what it was actually protecting. Then came 2020, and the entire calculation got thrown out the window anyway. International leisure travel essentially stopped overnight. The Tokyo to Honolulu route, built entirely around tourism, had no reason to exist for over 2 years. All 3 A380s sat parked, racking up storage and maintenance costs with nothing but the occasional test flight to keep engines turning and systems from seizing up. Picture that for a second. 3 aircraft that cost roughly $400 million each. Aircraft ANA never wanted in the first place. Now, sitting motionless on a tarmac generating pure expense with 0 revenue attached for 2 straight years. Every dollar spent defending against Delta and a bankrupt competitor back in 2016 was now just quietly bleeding out in storage fees with no passengers anywhere in sight. Commercial service didn't resume until July 1st, 2022, starting cautiously with just 2 flights a week. From there, frequency climbed back as demand returned until ANA was running these jets on their original assignment almost exactly as planned before the shutdown, sometimes twice daily during peak season. So here's where that leaves things. 3 A380s, one route, and a company that never wanted any of it. ANA didn't build a business case around the world's largest passenger jet. It built a defense, spent over $1 billion protecting territory from a bankrupt rival and a hungry American competitor, and then found a clever way to make the whole situation look like a plan all along. Sometimes the biggest aircraft in an airline's fleet isn't a sign of ambition at all. It's a receipt, proof of a fight nobody outside the industry ever noticed was happening, paid for in full, in cash, at nearly list price. If you want to see how Boeing systematically dismantled the A380's future, or why Emirates is now stuck holding the largest fleet of these jets on the planet, those stories are waiting in this channel. Subscribe if you want to keep following where the money in aviation actually goes.